we didn't even think about it because it just looked fun. It was a beautiful day, sunny, warm, great idea. Go whitewater rafting with your friends, right? Did not realize that some of my friends, including my boyfriend, who is now my husband, didn't know how to swim. Anyway, so we went to Riggins, Idaho, and we rented a raft and a guide to go down the Salmon River, which normally is about 15,000 cubic feet per second. It happened to be Memorial Day weekend, so late spring, the worst snowmelt year in history. And so it was running about 10 to 15 times greater cubic feet per second. We hit Ruby Rapids, which was a class 5 rapid, toppled the whole boat, turned it upside down. Everyone was lost, including Matt. And we found everyone except Matt, because I didn't realize he didn't know how to swim. But he had a life jacket on, and he floated downstream and got picked up by another guide service. But this is like he lost his cell phone, couldn't contact us, and I'm freaking out. I killed my boyfriend. Finally, a couple hours later, we find him, and we have never gone whitewater rafting since then.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. It is a familiar sentiment to most, as few people manage to live their lives never having done something foolish or destructive because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Some mistakes are due to lack of thinking. Some make mistakes because they think too much. Sometimes mistakes are born due to overconfidence, and other times they result from a lack thereof. Making mistakes is an inherent, unavoidable part of growing up. That we learn from them is imperative as we take steps towards adulthood and all that comes with it. Everyone starts somewhere, and our start has been Redmond, Washington. Where we will go and what we will become when we leave this town is a mystery. But Redmond will always be a part of who we are, and our mistakes will always be a part of who we are. What follows is a story about Redmond, Washington, for even when our travels take us thousands of miles away and across oceans, our Redmond upbringing will continue to shape the way we see the world, the way we interact with others, and yes, the way we make mistakes. This is a story about Redmond, Washington, but it takes place in East Berlin.
I was 24 years old, and in the summer of 1984, I was backpacking through Europe. My goal in going to Europe was just to broaden sort of my life experience. And I went through, countries from the UK, France, Spain, Italy, Austria, Hungary, and then eventually at that point had gotten through Switzerland to Germany. I started out in June, and by late July I had arrived in West Berlin. And I spent a day in East Berlin and then was ready to move on to my next destination, which was Copenhagen. What I didn't realize was that the East Germans, who were the communist socialists, controlled the transportation between East Germany and other destinations such as Copenhagen. The trains in Germany were the best trains I'd been on. They were clean, they were comfortable, they were modern, they were air-conditioned. In West Germany, yes. So when I got on the train to go to Copenhagen, I was really expecting to go on to a West German train. That's what I had been riding around on, and it was immediately clear that was not the case. It was very old, the doors were hard to open, the seats were torn up. As I found out later, the lighting didn't even work. And that was representative really of every aspect of the two cultures. In our compartment, the trains had compartments that typically would sit 6 people. And in my compartment there was myself and another backpacking guy from America and a Danish family, parents and a small boy and a small girl. Train left, the sun went down, it became night, and our compartment was brightly lit, and so the light would not go off in our compartment. And I had this idea that I could take this pen that I had with me that was, I thought, a plastic pen, and the reason the light wouldn't go off was that the switch had actually broken.
So it was just like a normal light switch.
It was a normal light switch on the train, slightly above the door, but it was missing. And as I looked in there, I could see there was like this tube where the switch was sort of supposed to have plugged in. So I thought if I just took my pen and I stuck it in there, and then I could pivot it down and I could turn off the lights.
And
so that's what I did, and as I stuck the pen in, there was this huge explosion of sparks that came out of the switch, and all of the lights on the train went out, which only made the sparks look much brighter. And then the train started to slow down and eventually stopped. And so this is out in the middle of somewhere in northern East Germany in a pasture in a field. And then after the train stopped, and as it was stopping, all of these soldiers were going through compartment by compartment, and they all had their submachine guns, and they were pointing them, and they finally came to our compartment, and I had immediately sat back down and looked as passive as possible in this situation. And fortunately, neither my American counterpart or the Danish family said anything, and it was pretty clear that the soldiers had no idea what had actually caused all the lights to go off. So they went through, they opened our compartment up, they came in with their guns, they left, they went along and checked everything else, and eventually continued on their way.
Well, what was your first thought when all the lights on the entire train went out?
My first thought was, I'm a goner. I'm in East Germany, I've knocked out all the power on a train, there's all these soldiers. I figured they would pretty much quickly know which compartment caused the outage. I thought I was going to prison. But as they started to go through compartment by compartment, I started to have a little bit of hope that they didn't know which compartment caused this. And as it became clear later that the lights were out across the entire train, I thought, oh, well, there's 100 compartments. And the only thing that really worried me were the Danish family and how they would react, and they were as stoic as could be as the guards came into our compartment. So I was quite grateful for that.
Why did you think it was a good idea?
Well, the lights were on in the compartment, which was not the normal thing you would do on a night train, because people would commonly want to sleep on a night train. And I thought I had a plastic pen, a purely plastic pen, which would not conduct electricity. It turned out that wasn't the case, so that wasn't a very good idea to have stuck the pen in a hole which is clearly designed to conduct electricity. And I didn't ask anybody about whether I should do it. I just picked up the pen and stuck it in there and blew out all the lights on the train. But in the end, what I realized was that at the very end of this plastic pen, there was a small little metal ring. And that metal ring had obviously shorted out the switch. And the infrastructure for a lot of things, and I had realized in East Germany, wasn't very good. And they didn't obviously have breaker switches or anything like that, so it had allowed that to knock out the power for the whole train. But I thought at the time, really the reasoning I had was that it was a purely plastic pen, and I didn't really notice that the tip was metal. The good news was that as the train started to go again, the lights did not come back on in our compartment, so I had successfully turned off the lights. The Danish family thought this was the funniest thing they'd ever seen, but myself and the American counterpart were still sort of terrified after this whole thing happened.
How was your perception of life in Redmond changed by your experience abroad, and especially by this specific experience on the train?
I think that, living in Redmond was a great privilege, and I didn't really appreciate it as much. In traveling all through Europe, you do begin to appreciate the sort of economic benefits of growing up in America, and having traveled then into Budapest in Hungary and East Berlin, it's even more stark how many privileges we have to grow up here. Not just the opportunity for jobs, but a really good education, and the freedom to just express and hear different ideas. So I think all of that really came home to me.
We have had so many opportunities in Redmond to grow up, learn, and make mistakes. We are 18 years old with our whole lives ahead of us. There is so much to be experienced and so many mistakes to be made, so many stories to forge that begin with the words, "It seemed like a good idea at the time." This Redmond life was the starting point, but where we go from here and the direction we take our lives, that's up to us.